Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora, I'm Marcus, and thank you very much for coming to my session, the last session of the day. I'll try to make it really quick, so it should only take about an hour and a half or so. Today I'm going to be talking about productivity bots, primarily how we were able to automate all the boring stuff at the company that I work for. But before I get into that, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. Now, I'm a Kiwi. That means I come from New Zealand. New Zealand is all the way on the other side of the world over here. New Zealand, if you haven't seen it before, is a very, very picturesque country with huge, beautiful mountains. And I thoroughly recommend that if you get a chance, you come over and have a look. Not only that, we're a very peaceful nation with hardly any conflict at all. So if you do manage to get a chance, do come over and visit us one day. But if you do, there's a couple of things you need to know. First off, this is not a kiwi. This is a kiwi fruit. It's a fruit, you eat it. This is a kiwi. A kiwi is a little bird. It mostly comes out at night. It's a flightless bird, and it scurries around looking for insects to eat. This also is not a kiwi. This is a diagram some mad person came up with one day. This is a kiwi. This kiwi is called Fred Dagg. He's a typical Kiwi bloke, and you can see him out there on his farm looking after his sheep. New Zealand is well known for the sheep. They used to outnumber us 20 to 1, and now they only outnumber us by about 7 to 1, so we're slowly winning this fight. This is not a kiwi. This is a supermarket. I've been in the supermarket. It's pretty cool, but it's not a kiwi. These are kiwis. This is All Blacks. This is our rugby team. It is by far the best team in the world. If you disagree with me, come see me afterwards and I'll sort you out. These are also Kiwis. These are Māori. They're doing a thing called a hongi, which is a formal greeting they have, very similar to a handshake. I started the talk today with a Māori greeting. But, I always forget this part. I bought popular Kiwi candy for you to come and try and persuade you to stay until the end of the talk. So at the end of the talk, come up here and give them a go. I don't like them much, but my wife loves them. She swears by them, so we'll take your word for it. But anyway, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about bots. So what exactly is a bot? I did quite a lot of intensive research into this while preparing for this talk. Primarily, I went to Google Dictionary and got their definition. Now, a bot is an autonomous program on a network which can interact with systems or with users. A bot is also the larva of a botfly, which is an internal parasite of horses. Today, we're going to be talking about that first bot. If you're here to hear about the second one, and then you're probably at the wrong conference. There's quite a few classifications of bots these days, and we're going to look at one in particular. But it's worthwhile noting what some of the others are, and just to let you know what I'm not going to be talking about today. So the first popular bots are the internet bots, commonly known as web crawlers. And they troll around the web, collecting information. There's a small company called Google, I think, which do this pretty well. They built a little search engine using these types of bots. They've been around for decades now. They're really well known. So I'm not going to go into too many details about these today. Now, I'm not a games player myself, but I understand that in games you have these things called NPCs, or non-playing characters. And non-playing characters interact with the players, and they do a whole bunch of stuff behind the scenes to help enrich the game. These characters are considered bots. Because I'm not a games person, I'm not going to pretend that I know anything about this, so I'm not going to be talking about this today. Chatterbots are getting very, very popular, especially when they're starting to invoke artificial intelligence and starting to recognize the human language and being able to respond to that. You see chatterbots quite a lot on Twitter and Facebook, and they're getting so good these days that a lot of companies are using them as help chats on their websites as the initial contact with customers. And the bots will then hand over to a real-life human if they don't understand their customer's request. It's quite an exciting area at the moment, But again, there is a ton of information about chatbots, so I'm not going to go into that today. What I am going to talk about are productivity bots. And the productivity bots I'm going to talk about are the ones that we implemented or that we created at the company that I work for to help us with our tooling, with our reporting, to help us automate all the boring parts of our jobs so that we can concentrate and play with the fun stuff. So that kind of leads me on to who the company is that I work for. Now, it's not a sales pitch. I'm not going to try and convince you to come work for us or anything, but it's important for you to know what we do so you understand the context behind the reason we wrote a lot of these bots. Now, the company I work for is called Pushpay. We're a New Zealand-based company, but the majority of our customers are in the US. We operate in the faith sector, and so in fact, the majority of our customers are US churches. Just a quick question. Hands up if you've got cash in your pocket. Does anyone have money? That's more than I thought. Most people here, they don't have any cash in their pocket. Now, if you've ever been to church, during the sermon, they pass around a collection plate. And when you're in the moment, you want to give money. But these days, people don't have cash in their pocket anymore. What they do have are their smartphones and their credit cards. So our application allows people to pay on their mobile devices and be able to donate money to the church. You can kind of think of us as PayPal for churches, simply put. Now, our application is a monolith. So we've got this huge application that we essentially dump into production. And we do this up to 10 times a day. So we're continuously evolving in a continuous deployment type scenario. But while doing this, we need to be really, really risk adverse. When we're dealing with real people's money, and we don't want to double bill them, and we don't want to not bill them. Either way, we're going to have a load of issues. So we need to be really, really careful about what we do. Just as an aside, my company loves ponies. You can see I've got one on my back, and I've got some stickers up here. There is a reason why we love My Little Ponies. I'm not going to go into the details now, but if you're interested, come see me after and I'll let you know. The main thing is, if you have any questions over the next few days at the conference, if you see me wandering around the My Little Pony, feel free to come up and ask me. This is a graph of our revenue growth over the last few years. The numbers here don't really matter. What matters is the shape of the curve, and you can see it's an exponential curve. And so what I did is I did a lot of intense analysis on various aspects of our company at the moment, and we came up with this graph, this highly detailed exponential graph. And this pretty much describes everything that we're going through at the moment. We're in a state of hyper-growth. And so not only are we in this hyper-growth type phase, deploying this monolith into production up to 10 times a day in a very, very risk-adverse way. There's many ways we are able to do this, but we rely heavily on automation to be able to get us through that. And this is what I'm going to talk about today. Right, so when I started at Pushpay, I was probably about the 8th engineer who started there. We were quite a small group. We knew exactly who each other were. We're all friends. We knew what everybody was working on. But over a period of time, as the company grew, more and more people joined, and more features were starting to get developed. And it was really, really hard to keep track of everything that was going on. And this added quite a lot of risk to our deployments. And so what we needed to do was kind of gather everyone around some kind of messaging system that you may have heard of. And as much as possible, we put all the information from all our different systems into Slack. And so we've got this one place that we use for communication. And that's essentially what we've done with all our bots. I'm going to take you on a quick whirlwind tour of some of our more important bots. I do have a demo at the end that I can show you, but I'm more interested in going through these bots and explaining the reasons why they're there and how they're involved. So if you have any questions, just feel free to yell them out. All right, so we'll start off with our development bots. Everything starts with development. If you don't do development, you've got nothing to deploy, you've got no product. All right, so we'll start at the beginning. One of the mechanisms that we use to be able to deploy to production safely is we use feature flags. Does anybody know what feature flags are? Most people? They're getting more and more popular these days. I'm just going to quickly take you through what I do, what we do at our company. So we have this production code. Now this is copyright, so nobody go steal it. And the very first thing we do is we duplicate it. This, of course, immediately violates the dry principle, the don't repeat yourself. But we don't care, because by doing this, we were able to deploy to production in a safe manner, and then afterwards we were able to clean everything up, again, in a safe manner. So we take the safety and the low risk over top of the dry principle. And then what we do is we wrap that top bit of code up on the feature flag. So if that feature flag is off, and then we're going to do this production code. If the feature flag is on, it's going to jump around that, and it's going to do that code down at the bottom. This means that we are then able to make changes and test it, both in our dev environments and our test environments, with the knowledge that we're safe, that we haven't impacted production at all. And then we can go and start changing the code on the new code. And when we're ready to deploy it into production, that's when we'll turn it off. But as you can probably gather from this, the more we do, we're going to get more and more feature flags. They're going to start littering through our code. We're going to end up with a lot of dead code in our code base. And not only that, some of our feature flags build upon other feature flags. And it's going to become a horrendous mess. And in a few years, we're going to have to scrap it all and start again. What we need to do as engineers is continuously go through the code base and clean up all these old feature flags to make sure that our code base is clean. But as engineers, of course, we're very lazy. This is not something that I would ever do. And so what we've done is created a bot to go and do this. What this bot will do is it'll go through our code base and it'll find all the feature flags that we have, and it'll check to see if it's on in production. And if that feature flag has been on in production for more than 30 days, it will send a nag, a reminder, to say, hey, you probably should go and clean this up. So this is our flaggy McNag face bot, and it's doing exactly that. It's finding all the features that have been on in production for more than 30 days and saying, hey, you should go and clean this up, pay some attention to this dude and get it sorted. Not only that, we can have feature flags that get into a worse state, and that's when it's on in dev, on in QA environment, and off in production. And there could be many reasons for this. It could be that the feature is no longer needed, and so we didn't bother finishing it. It could just be that we've forgotten to turn it on. And it's surprising how many times that happens. The problem with this is if you come back to the code base, 6 months later, and you see this a feature flag in the state, you don't know if you should turn it on or if you should delete it. You don't know what the right action is. You need some way to be able to follow through and clean it up. So the other part that Flaggy McNag face does is it goes through and finds feature flags that are in this type of state. Again, it waits for 30 days before nagging you. And then it reminds you that you should go and clean this up. You should complete it. Either delete the code if you no longer need it, or go and actually turn it on production and get some value from it. Every line of code that we write, every line of code that goes into production gets code reviewed at least twice. The first time is by somebody within your team. We work on very short-lived PRs, so our PR would only last about a day or so before we need to go and get that reviewed and look at deploying it to production. Now, most engineers know that if they get interrupted, their productivity plummets, right? And it takes a long time to come back up. So we don't want to constantly harass people to go and review our PRs. So what we've done is we've implemented a bot that will react to labels on the PR in GitHub. So essentially our workflow is, I'll make a change, and of course I think it's amazing, all my changes are, and I'll tag this change, I'll label it as ready for review. That will trigger a notification into Slack, into our Teams channel, for somebody in my team to go and review it. And so when somebody's free, in an hour or so, they'll come and they'll go through the list and they'll come and review my code. And of course I'm completely wrong. My changes aren't that great, they're in fact rubbish. And so they'll go through and add a bunch of comments, tell me everything I've done wrong in there, and then they'll mark it as a question. That will then trigger off another notification, and as you can see here, it will alert me. and tell me that I've got some action I need to do on my PR. So I'll go and fix up all my mistakes. Once I've done that, it's ready for review again. They'll then come and have another look when they're free, and then they'll mark it as ready to land. At that point, I am then able to look at deploying that change into production. The second code review that we do on our code is after we've merged our change and after it's on its way to production. When we started as a company, we had daily stand-ups, and there was a few of us, stood in a circle and did our, the three-question thing. And as we grew, this became more and more tedious. It took longer and longer and longer, and you didn't really care what that person and that over there was doing. And so what we did is we broke it up into small teams. But then after a while, we found that the teams were starting to get siloed. They were becoming feature experts in a particular area, and we had no idea what other teams were doing. We needed some way to fix this, and this is where we introduced the pollination. The pollination is getting somebody outside of your team to review the code changes that you've done. And this way, we're able to share the feature changes that we're doing with other teams, and we're able to share technical learnings between the teams. And it's actually brought us quite a lot closer together. So what we do is when we merge the changes into the master branch, we have a bot that will detect that, automatically assign that PR to somebody outside of our team and send them a direct message and say, hey, can you go and review this? They then have 1 to 2 weeks to review it. There's no bottleneck here, there's no pressure to get it done, it's already on its way to production. But they need to do it in a timely fashion, because if there's any issues or anything with that change, no doubt we've already fixed it by the time they've come and had a look at it, and so then they'll be reviewing obsolete code. So it needs to be done in a timely fashion, but it's not super urgent. So we give them about 1 to 2 weeks. What they'll do then is they'll go and comment on it, put a whole bunch of comments and suggestions, and then they'll remove the pollination label from it. The removal of the pollination label indicates a completeness of the pollination, and that triggers a message into Slack. It has all the comments in it from that person, and it alerts the PR owner so that they can go and have a look and see what the recommendations are. And then if there's any changes that need to be made, that'll be done in another PR, and that whole process will start again. Because they wait a week or two, you tend to forget what PRs are waiting for pollination. If something is assigned to me yesterday, I'll ignore it because I'm super busy, and today I would have completely forgotten about it. So we have a bot that goes through GitHub and finds all the PRs that are waiting to be pollinated, and it sends us a nag message. So you can see here that I had 3 pollinations I need to do. So our bee bot's doing this. This one here is 14 days old, and so this bot is starting to get a bit passive-aggressive. It sends a notification to me with some sad type of emoji saying, hurry up and get a move on and get this done. That way, we are hopefully able to keep on top of everything. There's nothing engineers like worse, right, than getting nagged all the time. And so by nagging them in a friendly fashion by the bots, that helps encourage us to go and clean up our code base. The next step is deploying. If we don't deploy our changes, there's no point writing them. So this is really important to us. And as I said before, we do this up to 10 times a day. We need to know what changes are going into production. And we need to keep an audit history of changes that are going into production throughout the day. Partly so that everybody knows what's going on. Also, if there's a problem, you can go through this audit, and hopefully that will highlight a particular area that may be at risk. And so when we merge stuff into the master branch, it will automatically create a message into our deployment channel. So we have a bot that's sitting there waiting for and watching for any kind of mergers happening, and it will send off a notification into our channel. And that means that everybody who's interested can keep an eye on the changes that are happening throughout the day. We have automated testing. I assume pretty much everybody here does. It used to be that hardly anyone did automated testing, but these days I think most people do. And when we initially started doing this, we had all these different test suites and environments that we had to go and look at and monitor. So every time we deployed to production, we had to go and check out all these different systems. And not only that, when you check a system, the tests haven't finished yet, so you've got to keep refreshing all these different test systems. It was tedious and it was annoying, and quite often you'd forget to check one. We had a very low confidence around knowing if all our tests are passed, because we weren't sure if they're all being actively checked. And so what we did at that point is we created a bot to go and poll all these systems every time we did a deployment and pull all that information into Slack for us. And so this is our first cut of that test, of that bot. And you can quite clearly see here the different stages that it's going through, from when the tests are waiting to start, to when they're running, to when they've succeeded or when they've failed. You can quite clearly see down the bottom here that we have three passing tests and one failed one. And to work out which one has failed, you go up to the top line here and find out the title of that column. It's the one at the end, so in this case, our Babbage tests have failed. Over time, though, as we added more and more test suites, this became really noisy and really annoying to watch. So all these big emoji were drowning out other messages in that channel. And being able to track it all the way back up to see exactly which test suite failed, it was quite annoying. So we evolved it to look like this. You can clearly see here, it's still got the same information, but it's in a much compressed format, and we're dealing with a whole lot more different test suites. You can see down the bottom here, quite easily which ones are passed. We don't really care about those. We're happy that they're passed, but we're more interested in the failed ones. And we have 3 failed tests here. Each one of these acronyms is a different test suite, and you can easily go and click on that acronym. It's a hyperlink, and it'll take you directly to the failed tests where we can start to address them. This reduced a lot of the noise and made it much easier to diagnose, but it also gave us a lot of confidence that we were actually actively checking all our test suites to make sure everything was passing before we put it into production. Once everything passed, all our QAs had done the exploratory testing and everybody was happy, we'd then deploy it into production. And again, partly because of PCI compliance, because we're dealing with payments, partly because we need an audit of the changes that are happening, we created a bot that will send a message into our deployment channel to say when we're actually deploying. We use Octopus Deploy to deploy. It's a really super awesome product. If you want to know more about it, they've got a stand downstairs. And we've integrated Octopus Deploy with Slack to send out these notifications. So you can see here at the start, we deployed a sandbox and production at the same time. And we send out a message to say, hey, we're starting to deploy. And once we've completed, we send out either a success message to say it's done and everything's great, or we send out a failed message and with alerts to the appropriate people to go and look at it. Not only that, we've included these hyperlinks, which is a really easy way to be able to go into various areas and look at the exceptions for those particular areas. So if you think that's one of our areas, so the public website, is a potential risk of new exceptions from the changes we've done, that's a quick and easy way to be able to navigate to there to have a look. And so they're kind of our important bots to help us deploy and get things into production. But of course, as our company's grown, coordinating all those changes has gotten to be problematic. When we started, we had a shipper's captain's hat that we wore for a week, and you became the shipper captain for the week. Basically, all you did was coordinate production deploys. Any project work or anything like that was put on hold, and your responsibility for the week was to look after production deploys. So that was checking to see all the changes that were going to go into production. That was making sure that all the tests are passed. It was making sure that all the QAs had done all the testing that they needed to do. You were actually the person who shipped these changes into production. You monitored production afterwards to make sure that there were no new errors. If there were new errors, you were the one who had to go and investigate it and find out what was going wrong. And this took quite a lot of time. It's perfectly fine. There was only about 8 of us, and we all took a turn each. And so you'd only ever have to do it once every couple of months. But as we grew, the overhead of this became too huge and it became overwhelming, and we had to come up with some way to be able to handle getting more and more changes into production. It was around about this time we listened to the Spotify engineering videos. Has anyone seen those videos? No one? Cool. I'll put a link up to them at the end. You can go and have a look. We watched these videos. Spotify is obviously a very different company to what we are, and so we just got inspiration from the videos and we took out bits that we needed. Back in, when we had the captain's hat, we didn't need very much of the Spotify stuff, but as we grew, we found we needed more and more of the types of processes that they implemented. And so our solution at that point was to create a bot called C3PR. C3PR helps coordinate changes going into production. So I'm going to give you a quick demo of C3PR now. This is a help. Don't bother reading it. I'm going to show you some of the commands in here. I won't go through all these commands, but I'll show you a few. So the first thing we do is you join. We kind of mix up our terminology a bit here. So this is a train with carriages that we ship to production. In here, we are using the channel topic as our persistent data store because why not? It was easy. And I've just joined, so now on this train, we've got one carriage just with me on it. We can add more people to the carriage. And more people to the train. So now we have 2 people on the train, each in a separate carriage. And now I'm going to add 1 person into my carriage. So you can see up the top here now, we have 2 carriages separated by the bar. That's just a convention that we came up with. The second carriage has only got test 1. That first carriage has got me and test 2 in it. By convention, the person in the front is the driver. So they essentially do everything that the ship it captain used to do, but just for this one carriage. So they're responsible to make sure that when we ship these particular changes, that all the tests are passing, that the QAs are all happy, that somebody with production access is around in case something goes wrong. They're the ones who actually do the shipping into production, and they coordinate everything. When somebody joins a train, C3PR will send an alert to the driver of the train to say that this person has joined. And then by convention, that person will then come and start a thread message on that notification and explain the changes that they're actually putting in. That allows the driver then to assess the risk of the changes. So remember, we're very risk adverse. We constantly deploy small changes into production. So the fact of them joining, if it makes this particular change too risky, and then we'll politely ask them to leave. We can keep adding people, so we can keep making as many carriages as we want. We can also kick people off, so they may decide that they no longer want to deploy their change for some reason. Or we could be feeling mean and vindictive, or they could have stolen our lunch or something. We can just go and kick them off. Now, our first stage, as you can see here, is a roll call. So what can happen is you join the train and you could be in a carriage 3 or 4 carriages down the line. It could be a few hours before your turn comes up. When your turn comes up, you could be at lunch and you may not be ready to be able to deploy. Now, we need to keep deploying continuously. If you're not around to deploy, and then that's going to cause a huge bottleneck in the shipping process and is going to block everybody after you. So I built this really cool thing that if you don't ready yourself within 5 minutes, it'll automatically kick you off that carriage and put you to the end. By saying you're ready, it means that you're at your desk, you're ready to merge in your changes, you have sufficient support to do it, and it puts this pretty little star next to your name. When everybody is ready, the carriage will then move into a QA, emerging state. So you can see here that we're now in emerging state, and that means everybody in their carriage is then able to merge their changes into the master branch. It also puts out some handy information in here and links to various areas, so you can see what PRs are ready to go. When everybody has landed their changes, you're not going to see it here, but when you merge your change into production, it will send out that message that I showed you before. But because this is a demo, we're not actually seeing that come out. But when everybody is ready, everybody has landed, merged their changes, and readied themselves, and then it moves into the QA phase. What this will do then is it will automatically build the application. It will then deploy it to the test environment, and then it will initiate all the acceptance tests. And while the acceptance tests are running, you're busy trying to actually break it. We're totally rely on the acceptance test for the happy path testing, and we're trying to actually go and break it at this stage. Once you're happy, all the tests are passing, you've had sign off from the QA, and everybody's happy, ready to go. And then you're ready again. Once everybody in your carriage is ready, it will then move it into the prod state. And that means that you can then deploy this change into production. It will also give you a runbook, which is really useful to go and check out just in case things have changed. And it gives you links to various metrics. So we have metrics for business, developers, ops, and you can go and have a look and make sure that there's been no adverse changes resulting from your deployment. Once it's in production and everybody's happy that the changes are all okay, everybody all ready, that will then remove that carriage and it moves the next carriage into roll call state. And then the whole thing repeats itself again. Once our changes are in production, that's not the end of it. We need to monitor the changes. We have thousands of metrics coming out pretty much every second. If something goes wrong in production, we want to be the first to know about it so that we can go and fix it before our customers find out. More often than not, it's just a case of turning that flag back off again, and then we have the luxury to be able to diagnose what went wrong, knowing that production is okay. But to do that, we need to have a lot of monitoring in production. First one we do is a heartbeat. So we have various systems that need to be up. For example, we have APIs that need to be up and running. And so we just do a simple heartbeat check to make sure it's up. And if it's up, we'll just put down a success message. If it's down, and then we'll send a failed message and alert appropriate people. We use an application called Raygun to manage all our exceptions. So all the exceptions from everywhere within our platform get sent off to Raygun, and that does a fantastic job of grouping them and sorting them out for us. When new Rayguns happen, we've built this thing, the connection between Raygun and Slack, so that every time there's an exception, and then Raygun will come and tell us, and send us a notification to tell us that something is wrong, and then we can go and investigate it. Has all the links in there, so all we need to do is click on the link, and then it takes us right into the exact area we need. We use Sumo Logic to manage all our logs. So we have logs from everywhere, from operations, from our application, from all over the place, and they all get sucked up into Sumo Logic. And that means we can build some data analysis and things around our logging. So one of the things we do is metrics, especially for things that are short-lived. So I have an example here where one of our partners, we're moving all their customers from an old OAuth to a new OAuth system. And we just wanted to keep an eye on it to make sure that they're migrating and make sure that there was no issues, and we just gave them a hand with that. So we had this metrics thing in place that was looking through the logs, running a query on it, and then sending the results to Slack for us to have a look at. Not only that, we can set up various alerts. So if bad things happen that we detect in the logs, and then we can also send messages for that. So in this particular case here, we've had a foreign key constraint issue on one of our databases, and we're able to get this alert and then go and immediately diagnose it. As I said before, we have thousands of metrics coming from our platform every second, and we put them all send them all to a system called Vibrato, and they've got fancy dashboards and stuff that even I can use. As an example, we send a log of a metrics of the number of payments flowing through our product. And so if the payment's going through the product constantly at this level, and then you ship your changes, and then all of a sudden they drop down, you know you're in a wee bit of trouble. And we've set up a whole bunch of metrics, and we've created bots to be able to send those notifications into Slack again for us. So here's an example of just a warning one that's it kind of alerts us and say, hey, perhaps you should go and investigate this because we've detected some unusual behavior in this area. That's pretty much all the major automation that we have and as part of our deployment process. We have a lot of others, but this is the highlight, sort of our major ones that we use. But not only do we have automation to help us with our deployment and getting change into production and monitoring it, we also have ones that kind of helper ones that help out with the company. For an example, when I started, as I said a couple of times, we were quite a small team. We knew exactly who everyone was. But as we grew bigger, and at such a fast rate, we got to a point where we didn't necessarily know who everyone was or what teams they were in. And so we built this bot. It's a pony hipsters bot, again with the ponies. And you can see all our team names are named after ponies. So this one's Dr. Who's team. And it displays information about that team, the team members, and we can request this either for the team or for a particular person, and it gives us information about that. And we're able to use that to find out who people are and what they're doing. Because we deal with payments, we have quite a high PCI certification. And part of that means we need to keep rotating our passwords. That's not something I'm going to do proactively because I'm really, really lazy. And so we expire our passwords automatically. And a few days before we expire them, we start to send out notifications as direct messages to the person to say, hey, you should go and change it. So this is an example of one. I had 4 days left to go and update my password. This comes out every day. If I don't do it, and then I need to get an admin to go and fix my password for me, and then I get yelled at. So this helps me avoid that conflict. Very similar thing with AWS tokens. So these days we're using more and more microservices. And we have these AWS tokens that expire and we need to rotate them. So we have similar kind of alert in for that. Now I've kind of shown you all the good stuff that we do, but it comes with a lot of problems. You know, we have a lot of headaches that we currently need to deal with. For example, we have all this automation in all these various areas. So in bots that we've created, like C3PR or our automaton, or connectivity integrations between other bots and other applications like Salesforce and Sumo Logic and Octopus Deploy. We've got all these things all over the place, all interconnected. And they all send alerts and notifications into Slack. And they can override the profile image, they can override the name, they can put anything they want as the message. So often you have no idea at all where they came from. Right? So we have a problem with discoverability. You know, you're looking at a message in Slack, it's like, where the blazes did that message come from? And often, even if you can find the system where it came from, you don't know whereabouts within that system it came from. So trying to find these, it can be quite difficult, especially if it's a notification that maybe only comes up once a year, and so you don't recognize it, and you think maybe I should probably go and turn that off because we don't need it anymore, and trying to find where the blazes that thing is can be quite problematic. We also have a problem with maintainability. Now, who owns these bots? The bots are a shared responsibility amongst everyone in the team, but should we find a problem with one, whose responsibility is it to fix it? You know, is it the original author of that bot? Is it the person who found the problem? Should there be a team that actually looks after it? You know, or should we just ignore it and hope it goes away? Knowing who's responsible to look after these it can be a problem. Not only that, also associated with the maintainability is one of our bots is kind of like a monolith. That's how we started with everything. And so we have this monolith automaton thing, and that's doing a lot of our interconnectivity. But if somebody works on a bot that does this thing over here, because it's in the same application, if they mess up, it can, and the whole bot system goes down, that means everything breaks. And so we've got this tight coupling that we need to get rid of. We have a problem with testability. So quite often, our bots are connected to production systems, and the only way we can test is against their production system. Now, for example, take a look at our deployments. You know, the only way to test changes to deployments is to deploy it. and you have to deploy it to a production or production-like system. It makes it worse when the production system belongs to another company and we have very little control over it. And so sometimes we have quite a bit of a headache around testability and trying to make sure that we're not actually breaking things. We have a problem with suitability as well. So everybody has the capability to go and build these bots. You know, somebody might come up with a good idea, and they might go away and spend a week on the bot, and then it will never get used. So we're actually not getting the value back from it, and they've just wasted a week. So we have a problem with trying to determine if a bot is suitable for the company. And not only if a bot is suitable, but how much noise should it generate? So you see all these bots here, they're generating notifications based on alerts from other things. And often the bot will become too noisy and it'll drown out all the other conversations within the channel. So we need to make sure that both the bot is appropriate for what we need and it's not generating too much noise for us. We have a problem with slackability. I'm trying to keep with the ability theme here. So all our integrations and everything, they all get pulled into Slack. All right, so from all these different systems, they get pulled into Slack, which is really, really super awesome. Right? Because then we've got one place to look at. You know, as I keep saying, as engineers, we're lazy. If we've got one place to look, that's really, really great. But what happens when Slack goes down? You know, we have a really bad day then. What do? You know, do we stop deployment? Do we continue deploying, but I don't know, we talk to real people? We have a problem with that at the moment. If Slack goes down and we're scurrying around like mice, not really knowing what to do. I've given up on the ability thing now. We have a problem with evolving APIs. Slack, again, is a really good example of this. So Slack is a really super awesome tool, and it's been evolving constantly over the last few years, adding features and improving, and not only in the application itself, but within the APIs that we use. But our bots haven't necessarily been evolving to keep up with that. So some of our bots are still using the old APIs. And how do you justify to the business? So I need to spend a week to work on this bot so that it does exactly what it did last week. That's a really hard sell. Often it's easier to wait until the API is deprecated and the bot breaks, and then we say, I need to go and fix this. But that's not a state that we want to be in. So we have a problem around trying to keep all our bots up to date as the APIs for these third-party systems are evolving. So what's the future for us? I don't know. It's something we started to talk about. We're doing more and more work in AWS these days. And so a potential solution for us is creating something like a Lambda for each automation bot. That will potentially allow us to add auditing to it. So if we send all our external systems in through these Lambdas first, we can add traceability, perhaps. We can add diagnostics to say where this message has come from, you know, what system has it come from and who initiated it and how was it created. We can remove the coupling between all our bots. So if each automation was a separate Lambda, if one goes down, all the rest is still running. We could perhaps put in a layer where we were able to swap out Slack. So put in some kind of messaging layer. We can then swap out Slack, and if we need to, and change it to email or text messages or phone calls even. By doing this, it gives us the power to be able to do a lot of what we need to be able to fix a lot of these issues. We're in early days at the moment. We're still discussing, throwing ideas around about how we can improve this. If you've got any ideas to give us a hand, and then I'm more than happy to hear them. So this is a bunch of information. Got a link to the slide down the bottom here. Spotify engineering videos, as I mentioned before. And there's some information for the Microsoft Bot Framework. Now, I do have a couple of demos that I can show you if you're interested, or I can answer any questions that you may have. Yep.
Do you ever find, so we've used like email notifications, and eventually it becomes like spam. Yeah, so many notifications that you probably don't read them. Do you ever find that that's the case with what you guys do? And also, sort of might be something that you know is okay to not be turned on in prod, but your feature flag bot doesn't know that. So do you have to like set those little blacklists?
All right, there's two good questions there. The first, do our notifications become too noisy? Yes, they do. There's a real risk that if our notifications become too noisy, and then we're just going to ignore it. All right, we're just going to tune out. And we do have a few cases where that does happen. One case was with the automated testing, and we had those big emoji come out, and they was essentially drowning out everything else in the channel. If you try to have a conversation in that channel, and then it'll get drowned out by that noise. And for the important things, for the important jobs, we looked at trying to reduce the noise, either by making the messages smaller and compressing them. There's a few examples where we had messages come out that were 3 or 4 lines long, and we had a lot of these. By reducing them down to one line, that significantly reduced the noise. Taking out fancy emoji. I mean, emoji are pretty and everything, but they can be quite noisy. And so by sometimes taking out an emoji, that can help reduce the noise as well. We also potentially just stop doing it. We might get rid of it if we're ignoring it anyway, and then we're not getting any value out of it, so we might as well just stop doing it. So it all depends on what it is and what it's doing. The second question, I've just got a mind blank. Do we blacklist? Sorry?
Yeah, that's it. Blacklist.
Blacklist bots. Oh, that's right, for feature flags. Sorry. Yeah, so the question was, we obviously know more about our feature flags than what the application or what the bots do. So the bots have only got this information that they look at the time. They don't know the history behind it or anything. So we may know that a feature flag should be on in production for longer than it should be. And we have a couple of ways to deal with that. Primarily, we can tag that feature flag as saying, yep, just ignore this for a little bit longer. We can put a time frame on it. I have been known to keep increasing that time frame just to keep it quiet, but yeah, don't tell my boss. A really classic example is if the feature has been on in QA and off in production for 30 days. So this particular scenario is a real danger. We need to get the value out of the changes we're making. But sometimes a project we're working on will take longer than 30 days. And so you can end up in the state. And so we can just tag it with a time frame and say, hey, this is expected to take 90 days to develop rather than 30. And so that will silence the bot for that period of time. Some of them you can mark as keep and say, never nag me about this. I personally don't really like those. It's not a feature then, a feature flag in my opinion. It's more of a setting perhaps. But we do have that ability to do that. Any other questions? Yep.
What about using IRC instead of Slack?
Sorry, can you say that again?
What about using IRC instead of Slack?
IRC instead of Slack, yep. Slack is IRC, right? That's probably a really good suggestion for the future. That's something that we have looked at and talked about. The thing about Slack is it makes IRC pretty. Any other questions? All right, I've got a few demos. This is right at the end of the day. I could take you through one if you like. So I can show you more about C3PR. I can show you the code base if you like. I can show you how to quickly write a bot in 2 minutes. Or we can just go home. What would you prefer? Hands up if you want to see the C3PR code base. We got maybe half a dozen. Create a new bot in 2 hours. There's quite a few of that. Go home. Oh, no one wants to go home. All right. All right, let's see if I can get my machine working properly. What I need to do is try and get everything all on the same machine. Can anyone remember where that is? Display, mirroring off. Was it there? Do I want mirroring on? Click. Ah, perfect. No, not perfect. Computers are hard. Bye-bye keynote. Okay. Okay, I will quickly show you the Microsoft bot framework. So I was going to do this really fancy demo, and I thought, well, I'm at NDC, Microsoft the Flavor Conference. I better learn some stuff about the Microsoft bot framework. And I got really excited about it. It is primarily a chatbot, so I kind of lied before when we said that I'm not going to really talk about chatbots. But I can see how we can use this in a lot of applications that we use. So the way that we would use it is without the human language interpretation, and we'll just use very simple commands, but it allows you to set up dialogues between different things. And it is quite simple and easy to get started. I might see if I can make that a bit higher. Okay, so this will be an NPM package, and I will mostly accept everything. Author is me, yay! So right, that's okay. Now what I'll do is I'll install the bot builder, which is the Microsoft bot builder. And if the internet and demo gods and everything's working. Okay, so I now need to go and create my application. Yep, my magic thing doesn't work on first go, it's really weird. Okay, so what this essentially is doing, you can all see that at the back, all right? Cool. It's creating a new console connector, so it's starting to list on the console, and then this part here, the session part, so every time a message is sent into the console, it's going to respond and repeat that message back to you. All right, let's see if this works. There we go. So we've immediately created a bot. It just took a couple of lines of code, and it is now like an echo bot. It's not very useful, I admit, but it is I thought it was kind of funky. So we can extend that by setting up a server. So I don't know how you say this. I'm going to call it Restify. So we're going to install the Restify package. And that means that we can run it on a server, run it as a server. Okay, let's try. There's been an update to this utility that I'm using, and it appears that it only ever works properly on the second go. All right, delete that before I forget about it. Okay, so this first part here is setting up the Restify server on port 3978. It's creating a chat connector this time rather than a console connector, and it's passing in an app ID and a password from the environment. I haven't set these on the environment. We're going to use an emulator, so at the moment we don't care about those. It's going to listen on this URL, appy/messages, and then every time it receives a message, it's going to do what it did before and say, you said this. All right, so let's see if we can get that running. Okay, so Recipe is now running, localhost on port 3978. And I can pop over to the bot framework emulator that I conveniently installed earlier. Sorry. All right, what I need to do here is set up an endpoint. So let's call it NDC Oslo, just to be really random. And then we put in the URL for it. Can you remember that port? 3978. And if you remember, it was listening on API messages. Again, this is just an emulator, so I'm not going to worry about the application ID or the application password. And I'll just create that endpoint in here. Then I'll open it up and I'll start typing in messages. Hello. And you can see here that I've had a response come back, so you said hello. I found this really exciting because it means that we can start to test our applications really early. So generally, the bots that I've worked on, that we've built, haven't had this kind of emulator environment, and it's been difficult to test it in early stages. Not only that, if I click on this hello message, you can see up in the top there that I get the JSON response, or the JSON message that gets posted to the server. And if I click down here on the response, I get the JSON response come back up as well. So straight away, if there's any issues, we can start to diagnose it. Also down in this log here, this is an interactive log. This is showing us the messages that are going between the emulator and the server that I have running. And we can click on any one of these messages to see the JSON payload in that particular message. And so quite often in the bots that I'm used to developing, the messages will just disappear and we don't know what's being sent, and we have to spend a bit of time to set up some kind of logging to capture it or something, or use Charles Fiddler to see with the network on the traffic. All you have to do here is install this emulator and it's all done for you. All right, so again, that's pretty easy. How long have I got? 5 minutes? 3 minutes? 3 minutes? Let's see if I can quickly do this other one real quick. Another really exciting thing that we have are all these samples. So we're going to bot builder samples, look in node, and we'll choose one at random. Completely random. I totally haven't used this one before. And we go and install everything in there. And yeah, I did prep it earlier. Let's have a quick look at that. So this is the multi-dialogues. So if you haven't used the Microsoft Bot Framework, that operates with using a bunch of dialogues, and so you can set up a whole bunch of different sections that build on top of each other. Actually, let me just demo this very quickly, and then if we have time, I'll quickly walk you through the code in 2 minutes. I'm just using the same server here, just in the same port, just to make it quicker to demo. Okay, so I've just initiated the conversation. It's come back and said, "Are you looking for a flight or a hotel?" So I'm looking for a flight, thanks, and it's come back with an error message because that's currently not supported entirely for the demo. So I'll start it again and say, "Okay, then this time I want a hotel. Please enter my destination, Oslo. When you want to check in today, I guess, Wednesday. And I want to stay, 14 days because Oslo is amazing." And we'll go and search for the hotels, and then it'll come back with a list of hotels. This is much simpler to set up than what you think. So again, it's just using the bot builder and Restify. All the stuff you've seen before, I quickly rushed through, but no doubt you'll totally remember. Sets up the Restify server, sets up the chatbot. The difference here is we've got this list of dialogues that we're now implementing. And when we start up the bot, we put in what they call a waterfall set of dialogues. And so this first section here is the initial communication. And then once you've made your selection, it then flows you into the second one here. and it lets you, it does the appropriate response for those. Very quickly, just looking at the flights. So this is all there is in the flight dialog. It just returns back a session error, and this is what we saw before. The hotel one, it's a wee bit more complicated, but as you can see here, just sort of the high level looking through, you can see that it's following the structure that we saw. So it's like, welcome to the hotels finder. When do you want to check in? How many nights do you want to stay? Searching for the hotels. And then this store that it's using for the demo purposes is just random generated information. But that's how easy it is to start setting up bots. And so I see a huge potential on this. We can use this for C3PR because that's essentially just communication between each other, and each stage in that process could just be another dialogue that looks after that particular stage. And there's a whole bunch of other fun stuff that I've been looking to implement, and it looks like with this we can. You can easily host it on Azure Bot Services using all your free credits that come with MSDN, and away laughing. All right, so that's all I've got time for. Thank you very much for coming, and enjoy the conference. I don't like it, come and help yourself. And I've got pony stickers if you want them.